Hello, welcome to Unify's webinar on NXJ reporting. This is your host, Matt Brunquell, and we're going to go ahead and get started. And in just a moment, I'll introduce our technical presenter today, Kevin McCormick. But before I do, just a few housekeeping items. First of all, we welcome you to ask questions during the presentation, and the way you do that is through your WebEx toolbar. You'll notice a little button in your toolbar with a question mark. That's the Q&A button. We ask that that's what you use to ask questions. There's also a chat, but it just makes it easier for Kevin and I if we use just the Q&A. It's just one panel for us to check on. And feel free to ask questions during the presentation, and we'll get to them during the Q&A session. The other thing is, for those of you new to Unify, I just want to take a moment to give you a highlight of who the host company is for these webinars. Unify is a publicly traded software company, and we've been in business over 25 years. And we were the first to deliver a relational database in a Unix environment. And since then, we've been delivering development software products that run across different databases and platforms, really geared towards building and modernizing business applications, and really gearing those towards business application developers, the ones who are trying to deliver applications and solutions to the end users without having to do a lot of low-level coding. So that's a basic or a short overview of Unify. Now, in terms of our agenda today, what we're going to do is it's a pretty straightforward agenda. We're going to give you a quick overview of NXJ Enterprise, which is the NXJ in the NXJ product family, what you can use NXJ reporting with, and obviously a quick overview of reporting as part of that. And then we'll go ahead and go into the demo, and then we'll have a Q&A. And with that, I want to introduce our technical presenter today, Kevin McCormick, which I'll do right after I give you the overview of NXJ Enterprise. So on NXJ Enterprise, basically, this is a development tool for building and modernizing applications. And basically, the premise behind the product is building web applications, rich Web 2.0 type of web applications where it's just a browser interface very quickly. And they're ready for the web. There's no applets or plugins. It's really geared towards, as I mentioned, the business application developer, so that they can focus in on building the business application itself and not have to worry about building out all the low-level plumbing that's associated with Java technologies or C# technologies. They can build it much like how they've done client-server type of applications in products like Power Builder, Team Developer, Oracle Forms, those types of solutions. It's very much that type of approach. It is also built and geared towards service-oriented architecture development, so it allows you to very easily consume and publish web services, again, without having to build all the low-level stubs to integrate those web services. And this gives you the ability to do expose both the data access of your application as a web service, as well as the business the business logic layer, if you will. And then the other piece, which we've done a webinar on recently, that's really exciting about NXJ Enterprise, is the business process management. It allows you to basically model and deploy that model as part of your application, the business process. So you graphically build it, but then you deploy it as part of the application, and it separates the workflow logic, if you will, of your application from your application or business logic in the presentation layer. And what's really unique about the NXJ business process management, because there's lots of tools out there that let you model a workflow, but then at the end of the day, you still end up having to take that model and do a lot of low-level coding to integrate it into your application. What's unique about the workflow in NXJ is you don't have to do that low-level coding. And then the last piece of NXJ Enterprise, which is really what this presentation is about today in demo, is the enterprise reporting. Part of NXJ, it is a Java-based development tool, it has a full Java-based reporting solution for enterprise reporting. So it's got a scheduler, it's got all kinds of capabilities for deploying reports in different formats, as well as a drill down. So I started going into this already about the NXJ reporting, but what I will mention, I mentioned the scheduling. That's really the report server, so it's very scalable, but it allows you to schedule that. It has a complete design environment for building your reports and building what what you want the user to see and what parameters they might want to use. And then I mentioned all the different formats that you can deploy it into, and then kind of like how I was describing the workflow piece, what's unique about the reporting is how it's integrated in with the other pieces of the NXJ enterprise. So without having to do a lot of low-coding integration work, you can it's integrated already with the NXJ forms, so you can deploy these reports as part of your application very easily. Now with that, what I'm going to do is introduce our technical presenter, Kevin McCormick. He's been with us over 15 years, and so really lucky to have him presenting today. He's been in all kinds of technical roles during his tenure here at Unify, from tech support, training, consulting. So he's been on both the pre-sales and post-sales side, and currently he's doing a lot of he's kind of our senior technical account manager working on our large accounts, and in particular he does key NXJ work for us, including he's our lead trainer for NXJ. So you're getting a guy who's very familiar with the ins and outs of this product and how the customers are using them. He actually was a big part of the initial rollout of NXJ when it came out 6 years ago. And prior to Unify, Kevin actually worked with some of our products at he was in government work, I'll just say that. And with that, what I'll do is go ahead and turn it over to Kevin for the demo and the rest of the presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Matt. And I'll pause here on the slide we were just at just to give you what the path through our presentation is going to be today. We'll talk just a little bit in a few slides about the IDE for the NXJ reporting solution. Goes a little bit of description about the report server and it's scalable and clusterable and things like that for large organizations or for performance enhancements. We'll then also talk about what we mean by actionable reports, whether it's users being able to drill down in the reports in the browser or filter data or group things differently, or create their own reports from scratch if you choose to let them do that. And then we'll do just a brief mention of how NXJ reports integrate with the NXJ form side of things. Okay, the NXJ IDE. What you'll see when we get to the demo is the NXJ reporting tool and its editor, its designer, sort of two parts to it. One is there's a catalog that holds multiple things, including queries, data source connections, formulas, computed fields, summary fields. All these items are separated from the report, and using the report catalog, you can construct multiple reports without having to recreate the wheel. It's a very easy way to create a lot of reports without having to recreate the underlying plumbing, as Matt said earlier. Then there's a report designer, and we'll see some screenshots and then work with it extensively during the demo, which if any of you have used control break processing reporting tools, we won't mention competitors at the moment here, but you're used to that concept of before and after events for groupings and detailed records. And we'll see a bit of that as we work through the designer. Then there's a runtime portion that's built into the report designer. So you can test your reports easily and quickly in an iterative fashion by just running them from within the report designer. It's a very easy way to make sure you're getting what you want. Because as you work with reports, anyone who's done that, users want them tweaked to the nth degree, whether in layout or presentation or just what data they're getting. So a little bit more on the report catalog. What we're seeing here is that that catalog has, again, the connections to your data source, which is generally a relational database, but you can also do your own user-defined data source if you need to get it through legacy systems, for example. You then define multiple queries using a graphical query editor, choose the columns to expose to the report designer, and any filter conditions. There's a complete formula language that is Java-based with a lot of built-in functions, and we'll see a sample of that as well, to make your report dynamic, whether it's hiding sections, showing sections, setting background colors, computing values. There's an entire formula language that's built in to make your reports even better. If you're using summary fields and other common field types, you can create those in your catalog and, again, reuse those across reports as appropriate. And then your queries and your reports are going to need some parameters. You're not going to always get the full set of data and always know what the query is. So there's a parameter concept inside the report catalog that's used to prompt the user, or you supply the values, for example, an order number or a customer ID, or whether to show a detailed section. All of those can be used to control what the output of the report is, or even what result is retrieved from the database. The report layout tool, is a WYSIWYG designer to let you create the report sections, fields, headers, colors, with a complete set of properties, anything from style sheets to how they're going to be rendered in the browser. And inside that report designer, what you're also doing besides the layout and report section is putting fields in, usually database fields, but certainly can be computed ones, embedding sub-reports, which are basically reports within reports that have the master detail, usually relationship between them. And then if you choose to, there's certainly graphing and charting tools and wizards to make creating the charts to give a graphical representation of your data, and we'll demonstrate one of those here. And there's a variety of other things you can do within the designer, but this is an overview presentation, and if you need more information, we can certainly show you more details beyond this demo. The report server, Matt mentioned that this is an enterprise-level solution, and so this is a report server that's deployed on your J2EE application server, whether it's JBoss, WebSphere, WebLogic, Oracle application server. And inside that report server, there's a lot of power, whether it's letting users schedule reports dynamically, or you scheduling them to be run every night at midnight and mailed to each user, for example. You can also have reports cached, so you might run large reports at nighttime or periodically throughout the day and cache those results on the server so the user just gets the current version of the report without having to rerun the report every time. There's also a security level built into the report server that if you choose to expose the report portal to your end users, you can control what reports they can see as well as what data they get inside the report. So it's down to the record level for security on the report data. So we mentioned actionable reports. There's a couple of parts to this concept. The first is that there's different output types available in the reports. Whether you choose, what your users choose, HTML, XML, Microsoft Excel output, PDF, regular straight comma separated values, and there's also dynamic HTML, but we'll see that in a second. Now, depending on your environment, all those reports have to be configured to be sent to a printer nearby the user if you're in an office environment compared to out on the web someplace. So actionable reports. If you're using the dynamic HTML output ability of the report engine, your user gets the report as you designed it, but once it's open, they have the ability to do things like change the grouping of how data is being viewed, what the sort order is of the data, choose different styles, change report types or chart types, filter data down so they can drill down into data without you having to have multiple reports to give them what they think they want. Here they can figure out what they want. And in addition to that, there's the ability to create dynamic reports from scratch that your users can do. You expose a set of data, a data cube. They then can choose which columns to group and sort by and what columns are visible, and they then can save these reports for themselves to be used later. So that pulls some of the burden off of you, the report designer, and puts some on them for those more advanced users who know the table structure or the data information, so they can create what they want when they want. and I'm all about demoing products rather than talking to slides. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from scratch and go ahead and build our report server here. Let me get my little paper that has my information on it. I need this for connection information. We're going to start with this is our report designer that you're seeing now, and we're going to create a new catalog. And we'll figure out where we're going to put this. So what we're going to do is go down to our webinar folder. We'll create a new folder inside here. Webinar 2. Give the catalog a name. And we have a new catalog. Oh, let me go choose my right directory here. There we go. So once we have the report catalog, we'll go to our catalog browser here, move around some of our windows. These are dockable windows, so you can hide them, show them, or go ahead and collapse them and pull them apart so they're not docked. We're going to add a JDBC connection, and in my case, this is going to be against the Unify SQL-based database. So we're going to use a JDBC driver. The driver is JDBC SQL base. Now, what you think you'll notice is also connection pool checkbox here. So because we're using a J2EE application server, certainly we can use the connection pool off of those as well, but we're going to do a straight one from here. Oops, let me get my right URL for my connection. Just go straight against my laptop here. And we'll test connection. Did I drive that? Spell that correctly? Yes, I tried to use a capital B there. Driver. There we go. So once we have the connection created, we get a list of the tables that we want to go ahead and use within our catalog. We'll add them all. Just an easier way to do that here. So at this point, we have a connection. We have a series of tables we can use inside here. What we want to do is go ahead and create a query. Let's get the company, invoice, and items query. We'll give it a name, a long name here. And what we get now is a query editor, a graphical one. We'll say what tables we want to look at here. Well, we want to get the company table, the invoice information, and the invoice items. So we'll leave it at that for the moment here. And what we need to do now is tie these together in a master detail. So we'll shrink them up. So the company ID, we'll link those two together. So now we have a relationship there. And then we have the invoice number for the invoice item, pointing to the invoice number and invoice table. So now we've defined our query. What we haven't done yet is choose which columns to select from these tables. I'm going to take the easy route and just choose the asterisk at the top. So we'll select all of the columns. And we can go view the SQL that's going to be used inside this query. And we can make sure it's syntactically correct and execute it. And we'll go ahead and save this for now. We'll come back here in a minute and filter the data down. But let's go ahead and get a report done. Okay. So in the report layout, we can choose some standard layout templates. And we want to do a banded report because we want to group by information here. So let's do a banded report. We'll choose our query that we just created. We're going to now group by different records here. Let me make sure I get these right to match with our rest of them. So let's see, we're going to group by the company name, the company ID, and inside there, we'll leave that for now. We may modify this later. So we've got company ID, and then and inside there we'll also put the company name and the company URL. So we get all the information in for our company. In our detail section, we want to show things like, in fact, let me go back and add another level here of grouping. do the invoice number here. So the grouping, in fact, let me remove some of these. I'm doing them in the wrong section. So company ID, and then we'll do the invoice number as our two grouping levels. Okay, let me get that from scratch here. So company ID is our top level group, then invoice number is our second level group. Okay. Now in the display, this is where I've changed things up here. Underneath company, we want to do the company name and the corporate URL. Underneath the invoice, we want to know the invoice date and then potentially when the date was paid. Now for each of those invoice records, we want to see the items. So let's do quantity, do item number, quantity, and unit price. So how much each one costs. Okay, we could say summary fields, but we want to add one of those by hand. So let's just go ahead and finish this report. Okay, so we get a report now that has a different section and different fields, and I can select them and we'll match their fonts up so they're all the same. We'll change this to Arial. And we can also go ahead and move some of these over because we want to save some space for some of the other information. Stretch out their values, move their labels over, things along that. So normal layout, IDE kind of things. Okay. Now we can just go ahead and run this report just by clicking on the View button at the top there. We'll see company number, company name, what its URL is, and then for the invoices, invoice numbers, what date, what the invoice date was, and then we have the item number, the quantity, and the item price. So all those show up there without doing much at all, just a few clicks here and there, and we have a report. Now don't choose me for colors. I said these were the best choices. People don't let me choose colors. Okay, so let's say now we want to filter this data down for a particular region. Although before we do that, I'm going to do one other thing here. I'm going to create a summary field off of the amount here. So this is going to be a summation value based on the invoice number. So we'll get a total for this number. And we're just going to insert this into the footer for the invoice. So now if we run this again, what we'll now have is a total amount for all the items there. What it doesn't take into account, though, and we'll get back to the formula in a minute, is the quantity. So that's really not quite the correct value we want, but first let's go filter the records here. I want my query to now ask me or accept a value for a region. So what region a company is in. We'll call region parameter, we'll give it a name. And I'll say in this case, I want to bind this with a column in the database. I can do this all by hand, but this is an easier way to do it. And let's do this by country. It's just by country instead of region. It'll be easier that way. If I can spell country early in the morning, you'll see that this data is actually about coffee, and there's a reason for that early in the morning. So country parameter. So we'll see we'll use the country value, and we'll see that in our query. So let's go back to our query object for just a moment. And we're going to filter this. So we saw this just a moment ago. Let's filter this record down. There's a filter property, and we want to filter the company, the country in there, where it's equal to, we can choose different operators, whether it's like, greater than, less than, and various other comparisons. We want an exact match, and instead of it to a column, we want to do it to a filter field, to a parameter. Okay. Go ahead and save that off. Do OK. Now if we run this, we now get a prompts panel for all the valid countries in R1. And we didn't tell it to be unique, so it's going to list the repeated ones. So let's go choose something interesting like Australia. And now we'll get only the country, only the ones for the ones in the country of Australia. And one thing I didn't do when we generated these fields was to put the country value on here. So what I'll go ahead and do is insert a field. So we can do that easily enough. And there's our country field. And if you run it now, it'll prompt us, keep with Australia for the moment. We'll see these are only Australia records here. Okay, so the goal of this first part was to show how easy it is to get a report shown and to filter records down based on some parameters. In the real world, you wouldn't really prompt your user with that dialog. Instead, you'd feed that parameter from an application like NXJ. So what I want to do now, though, is show a little bit of the formula abilities of NXJ. So we're going to add a formula. We'll call it item total. And this is going to be, so I mentioned there's a complete formula editor here. There's a series of functions available for operations, whether it's math or financial operations. So there's a lot of built-in abilities. But do note that if for some reason it can't be done in this formula language, you can go to an external Java class to perform whatever computations you need to. But in my case, what I want to do is drill down to my tables and get to the item table. And I want to do quantity times our unit price. So I just want to know what the total amount is for each of the quantities there, for each of the fields. And that's our simple formula. We could have this much more complex, but this is all we want to do for this formula. And these formulas can be used for anything, again, for hiding sections, setting background colors, choosing to show images or not. So now we have a formula in our field. Let's insert that as a value. So what we can do is insert this formula as a field, and we'll go ahead and do this in the detail record, and we'll leave the header there. And if you'll notice what happens now, keep with Australia since it's a small number of records, is we'll have the carryover quantity 10 times 1125 is 112.50 and so on. So the last part of doing this in is to take that column and create a summary on it. We'll do the sum of that. So for each order, we will group it by invoice and put this down here as well. So now at this point we have the grand total of each of the orders as well, computed as a value. Okay, so the next part I want to show is just inserting a graph for showing your data as a graphical representation rather than just as pure data. And what we'll do this for is for each company, and we can look at our report inspector and figure out where we are in R1. So it's invoice, there's a company one. So for each company, what we're going to do is insert a graph. And I'm going to do this by inserting a section afterwards. And we'll just do insert, do a chart, and it brings up a chart wizard so we can figure out what query we're going to use. We'll use our existing query. We'll say this is going to be, let's do a bar chart and leave it as that. And then we get to the display one, and this is going to be our invoice number, it's going to be our category, and we're actually going to use one of our summary fields that we just did. So this was item total that I created. And if I did this right, that's all we need to do to get a report. And we'll choose a bar chart there, we'll finish it. We'll say we're going to show this just immediately after the company information. Again, I'm hoping those of you on the webinar choose colors better than I do. So let's go ahead and run this. Prompt for Australia again. And then so for each one, we actually probably should put this higher up, but you get the flavor for it. It shows for each order 48 and 51, what their total cost is relative to each other. So the one order was 694, another one was almost 3,000. And you can see that in the graph very easily here. Now that's sort of the first part of the report designer. So again, we're not going into any real deep details on the abilities, but just by looking at the report and structure, you can see that there's a lot of properties, whether anything from controlling multiple pages, whether you break your groups, go to new pages, or you suppress empty data, to how things look in the browser, what happens if you export to Excel. So there's a lot of different properties in there. We've only scratched the surface on this. But what I wanted to do, besides spending more time in the designer, is to show you the report console. So I switch windows here. I'm now over into our report console, and you'll see a couple of things in here. I have a previous version of this webinar that I've used before, and I can come here and just run a report. So deploying the report is either by pushing it from the report designer or pulling it from the report server, which is the company ID. And so now, similar thing. So order number, item quantity, item price, and a chart showing each order for specific companies, where their orders came from, or where the money came from, distributed. And I'll pause here for a second, showing you this is the beginning of the dynamic HTML, that I can choose. I only want to see the chart. I can drill down to that. I can also do things like filter the records, or choose how to order them. I want to order by item number instead, and it changes it subtly. Or perhaps I want to filter down where the order number, item number, so see what orders actually had item number 2 in it. So okay, I'll do this. Let's choose item number 4. And we'll process it and only show the records there. We chose not to have it refresh the chart, so it still shows all of them. And I will not go ahead and save that chart. One thing I wanted to do, well, so let's continue on for the server side of things. We mentioned that you can do advanced running. You can choose different output types for your report. So I can come to here and say, I want this report to be in, for example, a PDF output. And there are various properties you can set for this. And I can run it immediately. If I run the same report, it will go ahead and run. And now we're in a PDF output rather than in the dynamic HTML. So those are used to the PDF viewer. And again, you choose any of the output styles that you care to. Excel spreadsheet, PDF, HTML. Now, one thing we did mention also is there's ability to schedule reports. So I can, for example, come to this report and decide how often to run things. For example, I can say, I want to publish this report, and I can decide how to publish it. And say I want to keep this in a version control system, publish it to a versioning system, decide which outputs I want it to publish to, so dynamic, HTML, PDF, and Excel. And we also can say whether it gets emailed and who it gets emailed to, whether it gets sent to a printer, whether to an FTP site, and so on. So there's a lot of variety, a lot of choices here when working with the report server. And by the way, there's a complete API to this report server, so you don't have to go to the console. If you want to write, whether NXJ or other Java programs, you can access the report engine that way. You can say what time zones and what triggers when to execute the report. There's also notification. When you can choose whether to send notification to a list of users when the report's finished or when the task fails. So you might send a different list of different people based on that. Now, if we go ahead and run this, we'll schedule this for now rather than later. This will go ahead and submit it. So it's submitted successfully. You can see there were background tasks, including one from different times. And then we can see what the schedule was. There's nothing scheduled right now. And if we look at the report set, looking for the output for these guys, background tasks. Right. So these all have been gone ahead and run here. I was looking for the versioning one here. Report, go to the V icon here. A little click happy this morning. So what you'll see here is we have a set of scheduled reports that were run and executed already. For example, this is our one this morning from 8:34 our time in California, and the output types that we chose: dynamic HTML, PDF, or Excel for the different report types. So, for example, we can see how this looks in the spreadsheet, the same report that we've been running. So open my browser. Users now can do whatever they want to, since this is purely Excel. Looks pretty much the same as the other report as you would have expected. Now, because I'm not the best report color chooser and things, I wanted to open up some of the sample reports that we have in there to give you examples of how to do things maybe a little cleaner, a little better looking. For example, you may want to get information on customers or employees. So you can do things like multi-column control breaks, pull in images from records, and then navigate between the pages, and it'll process each of the ones. And the users can filter down and decide how to sort things. I want to sort by first name.
None of these people work for Unify.
No, none of these are Unified people. At least none that we've seen so far here. So that's one sample report. Now you notice it keeps prompting me. Do I want to save this? So I modified this, so if I wanted to, I could save this as my own version of the report to come back later, because I may have sorted or filtered it the way I want it. So I could go ahead and save that. So some of the other more interesting ones, shipments by customer detail. And so you can make nice, clean ones. So this one's good because it has interactive ability for the user. They can choose by territory. So this gives them a small web application behavior from the report side of things, and that will filter only the Brazilian copies, since they probably make the best ones anyway. Again, we will not save it at this point here. And I'm still going to see if we had any other ones that I remember looking at that proved interesting. Now here's one that has sort of charts mixed in with data in a nice, clean format. So based on what flavors of coffees are produced here, and then what the cost is and everything. So, okay, so one part I wanted to do here as well was to show you how customers can go ahead and create new reports. So if I do a new report set, let me get my little notes here on this one, because this one I want to make sure I got it right. So we want to go ahead, create a brand new report of our own. So this is an end user coming in, and you choose to let them do that. I'll give a report name. This is my report. We'll do a banded report, so we have groupings. And then let's see here. We want to go ahead and group this by territory. It can be customers, so territory, and then by customer name. So this is again letting the user choose this and create their own reports. And then in our detail section, let's just do a simple one based on order information. Let's do the order date, the total, let's do total quantity, and then we'll also do the unit price. And we can choose them to let them filter records down, choose the style, how things look in our reports. We'll choose top green, and then do a finish. And we'll go ahead and generate the report. So for Africa, we have the coffee type, the company names, orders, and it'll switch between the pages, and again, you can filter them down. Users can also view what resources are available there and what other items they can place into the report. So for example, on the order information, they could do a discount. There's a discount value as well. We could go drop this into the detail panel here, and we'll add that discount value to the report. So they can start working with reports themselves, again, offloading work that you might have had to do as the report designer. Again, there's a lot more ability here from both the administrative standpoint of providing the data for the user and what they can do as far as creating their own reports. So the last part that we wanted to touch on here for NXJ reporting is the integration with NXJ forms. And so the best way to do that is to show it. So I'm going to switch over to a different browser window and go to one of our NXJ applications we use for our demo. And for any of you who have sat in any of our other webinars, you've seen this information. This is actually a different set of coffee data. And you've seen the NXJ ability to create quick, easy, client-server type web applications in the browser with master detail and so on. But sometimes your users want a printable version of their data. So what we have, I have a couple of links here I've created out here quickly with just a couple of lines of code. So say I want to generate a PDF version of this report. I can simply click on this link in our tree, and it will go ahead and go and generate the report. And you'll notice we can expand it. And for this company, for Zanzibar Limited, it will give us all the orders they have and a chart showing the distribution of their orders. And again, if we wanted to do dynamic HTML, I had that as a separate link here just to show the different ways you can have your users choose it. So this is for Evelyn Clothing, who apparently sells coffee too. We can drill down through the coffees, they can change the styles for it and so on.
This way, if someone spills coffee,
They can
buy
clean it
new
too,
clothes.
exactly. In fact, there's a cleaning service involved to too someplace. So they can choose the styles and so on. Yeah. Okay, so with that, again, we were sort of trying to give a high-level overview of the different parts of NXJ Enterprise Reporting, from the report designer and the power there to the report server, whether for scheduling, letting users come back and view data later, and as well as integrating with NXJ. So at this point, I'm going to turn it back to Matt so we can look and see if there's any questions.
All right. Well, thank you, Kevin. What we'll do is we'll go silent here for just a minute to go over some of the questions that have already been posted during the course of the presentation. We'll start going through those and in just a minute. And so if you still have other questions, feel free to start posting them. Again, use the question mark button on your WebEx toolbar, and we'll see you in just a moment. Okay, we're back. We're going to start going through the questions. We only have a few here, so if you have more, please go ahead and ask them. The first question is, can I integrate the NXJ reporting tool to team developer applications?
Right, so I have to think about this for a moment. It's early, and we may want to do some checking back on our side, so I'll give you my thoughts on this. So on the team developer side, you're on a Windows application, so if you can launch a browser from TD with a URL, then absolutely, because there's a complete URL API for calling reports and passing parameters and credentials to the report server. So as long as you can construct a URL and open it, you're fine from TD. The other choices, again, there's a complete Java API, so if you do a Java application from TD in some fashion or another, you also can call the reports and get the report output that way.
All right, great. The next question, can I use NXJ reporting as a standalone from NXJ? And the answer to that is no. The reporting is an add-on to the NXJ Enterprise, so you have to have the NXJ Enterprise in order to use the NXJ reporting. That may be a key thing for the first question that we just answered as well, is you can, there's maybe ways, as Kevin's thinking, to integrate the NXJ reporting into TD, but you would have to have NXJ Enterprise in order to use the NXJ reporting. So we don't have it available as a standalone product. It's really integrated into NXJ Enterprise as an add-on option. All right, well, those were the only two questions that we have right now. So what I'm going to do is start wrapping up the webinar. If you do have any other questions, I'll ask while I'm wrapping it up. We have a minute or so here, and we'll get to them. So first of all, Kevin and I want to thank you for participating in the webinar. We hope you found it informative and useful. And we do these monthly on NXJ, one on Team Developer, and one on SQL Base. So we're always looking for topics that are really of interest to you guys as the audience. So let us know if there's specific topics on any of those 3 products that you would like to see. One of the best ways to do that is when you end out of the webinar session here, there is a survey. So give us your feedback on what you thought about this webinar, and then suggest any topics you'd like to see. Also, just so you know, we do have a SQL-based seminar tomorrow. And that's at the same time, same place, and it's on the new SQL Base 11.5 Console Manager. I hesitated there because I realized we just got a chat about the sound needing to repeat the answer on the Team Developer integration with NXJ. So what I was saying, I'm assuming it was my part to that wasn't loud enough, was that the NXJ reporting is not a standalone product. You have to have it as an add-on to NXJ Enterprise. So if you're going to use NXJ reporting, you have to have NXJ Enterprise. It's not available as it's a standalone reporting product, kind of like Report Builder. All right, with that, unless there's any other questions, we'll end the webinar here. Thanks again for participating, and have a great day.
So thank you.